In this movie, I'll show you how to assign a gradient stroke. So notice if I press Control Y or Command Y on the Mac in order to switch to the outline mode so that we can see the tracing template, that each one of the eyes is surrounded by this yellow boundary here. And its job is to indicate that we have a kind of lip here around the eye. But while it's generally a pretty firm stroke, it has a little bit of softness here at the edge. And that is a perfect use for a gradient stroke here inside Illustrator. So I'll press Control Y or Command Y on the Mac to switch back to the preview mode. And I'll go ahead and click on the stroke icon here inside the gradient panel. All right, now for the sake of demonstration, I'll go ahead and select once again the white-black gradient. And I'll crank up the line weight value up here in the control panel to 14 points. And that way we'll be able to really see this gradient stroke. So notice by default, Illustrator essentially just fills the stroke with the gradient. And in our case, we're seeing the gradient go from right to left, even though that doesn't match the angle of the annotator at all. And that's because, as indicated by that little universal no icon next to my cursor, the gradient tool does not work with strokes. So we might as well switch away from it to the black arrow tool, which again you can get by pressing the V key. Now that's not to say you can't change the angle of that gradient. You can. You just have to do so here inside the gradient panel. And so for example, if I were to change this angle value to 90 degrees, then I would see the gradient go from white at the bottom of the stroke to black up here at the top. You also have two other options above the angle value, including the option to apply the gradient along the stroke, and so now you can see that it's wrapping around from black to white, or you can apply it across the stroke, in which case you'll get a kind of neon effect. But we're not really looking for a black to white gradient. So I'm going to switch to this guy right here, white to trans, that is transparent, in order to produce this effect. And then I'm going to grab my default RGB yellow color swatch, and I'm going to drag it and drop it onto this final color stop right there to replace it. And I'm going to change the opacity value for this color stop to 100%, and then I'll take the location value down to 20% so that we have a very short gradient. Then I'll Alt Option drag that stop, and I'll drag away the white one, drag this guy all the way to the end like so that we have a location of 0, and I'll take the opacity value down to 0% as well. Now notice that we still have this gradient style, this guy right here, so that the gradient is going across the stroke, which is exactly what we want, but it's going in the wrong direction. So I'll go ahead and click on this reverse gradient icon in order to swap the direction of the gradient like so. Now we need to put the stroke behind the fill by going up to the window menu and choosing the appearance command to bring up the appearance panel, and then just go ahead and drag that stroke to below the fill like so in order to produce this effect here. Okay, a couple of other things to note. I'll go ahead and press Control Y or Command Y on the Mac to switch back to the outline view so that we can see the tracing template. Notice that the stroke is translucent in that it actually mixes in with the colors in the background, and that it's thicker down here underneath the shape than it is at the top, and it's also narrower on the sides. And so to invoke those modifications, I'll once again press Control Y or Command Y on the Mac, and I'll click on the yellow stroke here inside the appearance panel, and I'll twirl it open as well by clicking on a triangle. Then go ahead and click on the Inset Opacity in order to bring up the opacity panel and change the blend mode from normal to screen, which is going to blend the yellow with all the colors behind it in order to create a brighter and paler effect. All right, now just press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to hide that pop-up panel. Click on the stroke once again, then click on the FX icon, go up to Distort and Transform, and choose the Transform command. Then go ahead and click in the vertical move value and press the up arrow key in order to take it up to 1 point, which is going to nudge the stroke downward as soon as I turn on the preview checkbox. And notice that the stroke dropped down a little bit, so we have a thicker stroke down here at the bottom and a thinner stroke up here at the top. I also want it to be narrower, so I'll click in the horizontal scale value and I'll take it down to 98%, which is going to make for a skinnier stroke on the left and right hand sides. Just a small change there, but it's going to make a big difference as soon as I click OK. All right, now, once again, we've put some time and effort into these gradients, so let's save them as swatches by first selecting the Fill swatch here in the gradient panel, and then I'll click on a little page icon at the bottom of the swatches panel, and I'll call this guy Shades of Brown, and then I'll click OK. And next, I'll click on a little stroke icon here in the gradient panel and click on that page icon again at the bottom of the swatches panel, and I'll call this guy Yellow to Trans and click OK. All right, and finally, presumably we need two eyes for our emoji, and I'm going to create the second eye by going to the Rotate tool, clicking and holding on it, and choosing the Reflect tool from the flyout menu, or you can press the keyboard shortcut, which is the letter O, and then just go ahead and move your cursor over the vertical guideline and Alt or Option click on it to bring up the Reflect dialog box. Turn on the Preview checkbox so you can see the eye flip to the other side, and then click on the Copy button, or press Alt-Enter here on a PC or Option Return on a Mac in order to create a duplicate of that eye. All right, now press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to zoom out, and I'll click off that eye in order to deselect it. And that, my friends, is how you assign a gradient stroke that adds a little softness around the beveled edge of the eye here inside Illustrator.